This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Vayeitzey.
Welcome back, Rabbi.
Thank you. Parshas Vayeitzey. So we begin with the story. The story is brought in a Tosfos Masechta Kedushin on Daf Nun Beis Amud Aleph.
Thank you. Says
Tosfos, Ma'isa ba l'fnei Rabbeinu Tam. The story came before Rabbeinu Tam. The Rosh says Rabbeinu Tam was Gadol b'chachma u'v'minyan than all the Rishonim. Bivnoi shel Harav Rabbi Halevi, the son of Rabbi Halevi, shekidesh bas Asher echad. He married the daughter of a certain wealthy man, and this was his statement. The Yamar, he said, Bidcha mekudeshes li stama. He said, your daughter is married to me. The only thing is, this Osher, like all good Oshrim, he had more than one daughter. He had two daughters. V'loi piresh ploines bidcha. He didn't say shprinza. The problem was he had a shprinza and he had a yenta also. Right? So now the question is, who is he married to? Maybe he's not married to either. Because since, if we don't know who he's married to, then he can't live with either one because it might be achois ishtai. So the question is, what is the status of this man? V'amar Rabbeinu Tam, dimekudeshes. He's married. V'loi mi boyim shidech ba'achas mehem. Loi mi boy. Not only if he was meshadech with one of them. What does that mean? He was meshadech with one of them. The b'shem. What does it mean? Shidech ba'achas mehem. What does shidech mean? The Marsha explains. Loi mi boy. If in the shtar tanoim he wrote, I'm going to marry so-and-so, Yenta, b'shem. In other words, he wrote in the document, I'm going to marry this one. V'yachar kach kitshastam. So even though afterward he was vague and he said, Bitcha mikudeshes li, da'adaita dahachi kitsha. With that mindset, he married her to begin with. Since he introduced the relationship with the shtar tinoim, which said her name, even though at the time of the formal kedushin, he just said in general, Bitcha, da'adaita dahachi kitsha. It was with this mindset he married her. So not only in that case where there was some kind of clear articulation of who he wanted to marry, is he married, even if he didn't put any name in the Shtar Tanoim, he wrote in the Shtar Tanoim, your daughter, but he said orally, by the way, I'll tell you which daughter, I want Shprinza, V'amar Pleinisa Atenlach, then yesh lanu loymar da'adaita dahachi kidesh. Then we should assume that he married with this mindset. In other words, if the father said, even though in the shtar tanam it doesn't say which girl, and even though when he said mikudeshes li, he said bidcha, and he didn't say which girl. But if the father had a conversation with him, and the father said, I want to marry off shprinza to you, then he's married to shprinza. Why? The she'eris Yisrael lo yasu avlav lo yidabru chazav. Because the remnant of the Jewish people does not do iniquity, does not speak falsehood. In other words, you could take a Jew at his word. If the father said, I'm going to give you so-and-so, Miss so-and-so, you could assume that's who he married. So even though he didn't say who he's marrying, and it doesn't say in the Shtar Tanoim who he's marrying, but if the father alluded or said that we're dealing with this girl, we could assume that's who the chassan married. Says Rabbeinu Tam, comes Rabbeinu Tam and says a bigger chiddush. What if it doesn't say in the Shtar Tanam, and he didn't say who he's marrying, and the father didn't say who he's marrying off to this guy? So now you would think the guy's up the creek without a paddle. We don't know who he's marrying. Says Rabbeinu Tam v'oid, afilu loy piresh nami afilu bepeh. Even if the father did not articulate, yesh lanu loymar de kiddush hagdoila. We should assume that he married a specific one. Which one? The older one. Why? Because there's a pasuk in this week's Parsha. I knew you were hanging on your seats. Mishum, D'lo yasa kain bim kaimenu. Because we don't do this in our place. Lases hatzeira lefnei habechira, to give the younger one before the older one. Right? Good old Zayda Lavan. Your grandfather says in this week's Parsha Vayomer Lavan, and Lavan said, your grandfather said this. What can I tell you? We don't do these kind of things in our place. To give the younger one before the older one. So even though he didn't say, I want to marry the older one, and he didn't write in the Shtar Tanam, I want to marry the older one, and the father didn't say, I want to marry the older one, and you could say, look, maybe he dafka wants the younger one, maybe the older one is over the hill already. No, we assume he's marrying one specific one. Which one? The older one, because of the pasuk in this week's Parsha. Lo yayasa kein bim kaimenu, la seis hatzeira lefnei habechira.
Not over 13.
However,
12. Because he said,
only funny jokes if you have to do it. Rabbi Yachem Miyuni disagreed. Nechlak olav. He argues on Rabbeinu Tam. Va'amar, and he said, isn't this like a case of someone who marries one of two sisters? And what's the halacha if you marry one of two sisters? It's a machloikes between Abaye and Rava. It's called kedushin she'ein mesurin l'biyah. If you marry one of two sisters, and we don't know which one, so this is a marriage that you can't have relations with the girl, because this girl, the girl that you have relations with, might be your wife's sister. So Abaye says it's a good kedushin, we just don't know to who. And Rava says it's not a good kedushin to begin with. But neither one is like Rabbeinu Tam, because Rabbeinu Tam would say it's a good kedushin to one of them, to the older one. And Rava says it's not a good marriage, and Abaye says it's a good marriage, we don't know to who, so you got to give a get to both. So from this Gemara is a kasha on Rabbeinu Tam. And says Toysus v'af Rabbeinu Tam chazar by. Rabbeinu Tam was also retracted. V'loy avad uvda. And he didn't paskin based on this svara that he had, that even if a person does not enunciate who he wanted to marry, Rabbeinu Tam thought to say, well, let's assume he's marrying the older one. Says Menachem Yuni, we see from Abaye and Rava, we can't assume that he's specifically marrying the older one. And there is a question, because Tosus concludes, V'af Rabbeinu Tam chazar by. Rabbeinu Tam retracted. Did he retract only in a case where you didn't say who you wanted to marry? Or did he retract even in a case where they actually wrote explicitly in the Tanam that he wants to marry one of them? Even in that case, we don't know. But bottom line is, what we see from this Tosfos is that there is a halachic significance to the pasuk that it says in this week's Parsha, that Lavan says to Yaakov Avinu, you really thought I was going to marry Rachel to you? We don't do that in this place, to marry the younger sibling off before the older sibling. The question is, how far could you rely on it? Could you even use that as an indication that if a man says, I want to marry somebody, we don't know who, he's confidently relying on this pasuk that Lavan said of Layasa Ken Bim Kaimenu, Lases Hatzeira Lefnei HaBechira. But the bottom line is, Rabbi Isai, the question is, halachically, Bizman Hazeh, is this something which is binding in any way? If a person has a number of kids, and they should all go easily, and they should all go in order without having to worry. But it doesn't always work that way, and if it doesn't work that way, is a person entitled to marry off a younger sibling before an older sibling? Is it okay? Is it asur? Is it better not to? Is it a minhag? Is it an isur d'oraisa? Is it isur d'rabbanan? Is it aldas lavan? What is the concept of lo yasa kein bim kaimenu lases hatzirot le'abchir? In other words, before the shiur you would have said, that's what Lavan says to Yaakov. That's how Lavan was trying to trick Yaakov Avinu. But it doesn't necessarily mean in any way it's halachically binding. V'haraya, that it's not halachically binding. Yaakov Avinu was about to marry Rachel. So obviously Yaakov Avinu did not care about lo yasa kein bim kaimenu lases hatzirot le'abchir. Or do we say, Rabbi say, maybe Yaakov Avinu was not aware of lo yasa kein bim kaimenu, but that's why you need a good father-in-law. Lavan taught him the halacha that lo yasa kein bim kaimenu lases hatzirot le'abchira. And the question is, well, if it is halachically binding, there's also a concept, ein lamedim lefnei matan Torah. We don't learn out halachas from before the Torah was given.
Can we learn from the Asham?
What?
Can we learn from the Asham?
And can you learn from Lavan? And there's certainly a rule we don't learn from before the Torah was given.
we don't
Okay.
do child marriage.
We don't
It's
do
only
child
the
marriage?
father. In other words, there's one thing to say that a father can't marry his older daughter before his younger daughter. like what's his name? The Rabbi Oishia. But he was marrying his daughter. He was the daughter was married.
Not necessarily. Even though maybe in some of our circles we don't have sit-ins. We let the boy and girl actually meet each other a few times, or have. But at the end of the day, even if you would like to think they are the ones marrying themselves, hey buddy, you're the one paying for it, and you're the one who is halachically responsible to pay for it, because that's what it says in the Tanam. In the Tanam is not between the chassan and the kala, it's between the two mechutanim. They're the ones committing themselves to the money. Yes, the chassan and the kala are the ones deciding whether to marry or not, but there is certainly financial responsibility. How binding that is with Rav Moshe's Tanam? Okay.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Yeah, on what we just said. Yeah.
Laban said it's been Komenu, right?
Meaning what Laban was saying, we don't do these kind of things in our place. No, he wasn't just saying this is the minog in Aram Naharayim. In other words, we don't do these kind of things in our place. It's a way of saying that it's not the right thing to do. Okay, so
Laban had 7 years to tell him that.
Okay, so the question is, Rabbi Isai, if this is significant that one should not marry off a younger sibling before an older sibling, what about Yaakov Avinu? So why was Yaakov Avinu marrying Rachel? Why didn't he make up with Lavan? Look, I want to marry Rachel, so I understand if there's a halacha, you don't marry a younger sibling before an older sibling, I'll have to wait until Leah gets married. So this is the question of the Arachaim HaKadosh. Arachaim HaKadosh says like this, V'yesh lanu ladas, eich lo chash Yaakov mikoidam l'taynazu shein derech l'aseh hatzira. Like, why was Yaakov not concerned about this? So Arachaim HaKadosh says that Yaakov felt that if Lavan was so makbid not to give the younger one before the older one, then Lavan should have told him. Otherwise, if the father is not saying anything, and Yaakov explicitly says, look, I want to marry Rachel, then Lavan is not makbid, and if Lavan's not makbid, then I don't have to be makbid. It's ein davar zeh meha'akpada ha'makeves. If the father, in fact, wants to marry off the younger one before the older one, so that doesn't preclude him from doing so. And if Lavan was so makbid, he should have said something, and if he didn't say anything, and if Lavan would have said something, Yaakov could have decided either to wait or to marry Leah also. But the fact that Lavan didn't say anything, that did not preclude Yaakov then from, in fact, marrying Rachel first. I would suggest something a little bit innovative as to if there is an inyan not to marry a younger sibling off before an older one. So what about Yaakov Avinu? How was Yaakov allowed to go ahead and try to marry Rachel first? So this is just sort of a side point in the Shiur, but something a little bit creative. The Rishonim deal with the fact, how was Yaakov Avinu allowed to trick Esav into buying the Bechorah? First, Yaakov Avinu sort of took advantage of Esav in his moment of weakness. He saw that Esav returned from the field, V'hu Ayef. So Yaakov Avinu gave him the beans, and he bought the Bechorah. Then Yaakov Avinu snuck in, he disguised himself, he put on the hairy clothing, and he took the brachos. How was Yaakov allowed to do that? Look, Esav was the Bechar, and Yaakov was the Ish Emes, Titain Emes Yaakov. So how was he allowed to be so conniving and deceiving to steal the Bechar and the brachos? So Tosfos says he wasn't being conniving, he wasn't being deceiving at all. In fact, Yaakov Avinu was the Bechar. So well, wait a second. We know V'yadoy Chezes Ba'akev Esav. So the Rishonim bring down the Mamar Chazal, who compare the conception and birth of twins to the following analogy, and that is, what goes in first comes out last. So who came out first? Esav. Who came out second? Yaakov. Well, now you could debate this scientifically, but the zera of Yaakov Avinu went to Rachel. So let's say it went all the way up into the fallopian tube to the uterus, right? To Rivka, and so there Yaakov was conceived first. Then the zera of Esav went to Rivka, and he was conceived last. Now when he's coming out, who gets to come out first? Esav. And then Yaakov. So in fact, even though Yaakov was not the Peter Rechem, but Yaakov was Soif Masav Machshava Tchila, Yaakov was conceived before Esav. So the Hadar Zakein, one of the Bali Tosus says, V'yesh Loimer, Demin Hadin Haya Yaakov B'char. Really, Yaakov Avinu was the B'char. Why? Mashal, im noisin adam shnei avanim b'tzloiches. If you put two stones in a tube, achas and one tube, mi Vayeitzey rishain. Who comes out first? Mi shehusam rishain, ayachrain. Ma shehusam achrain Vayeitzey tchila. So Yaakov Avinu was tipa rishaina. Esav was tipa shnia. Esav came out first, and followed by Yaakov. Now you should know, this is not really a halachically valid concept because, first of all, Bechar doesn't go by the first of conception. Bechar goes by Peter Rechem. And the Torah brings down this pshat of the Hadar Zakenim, and the Torah says, not in the Balaturim, but in the Parshas Torah, he says, V'loi nehira, de Bechar bePeter Rechem talya milsa, ve'esav Peter HaRechem tchila. Esav's the one who opened up the womb, but we certainly see there is such an opinion in the Rishonim that Yaakov Avinu had, at least we'll call it the mystical din of the Bechar. He was conceived first. In fact, the Vilna Gaon actually utilizes this idea to explain the following. Look in number 6 in Parshas Vayeitzey. So you say, okay, well, Rabbi, where are you going with this? Because even if you'll say Yaakov Avinu was older than Esav conceptually, how is that going to help us for Rachel and Leah? And you'll see, I have a trick. Look in number 6. The Vilna Gaon in Parshas Vayeitzey on the pasuk, Kisiyeno le'ishtei noshim. A man has two wives, ha'achas ahuva v'achas sinua. One he loves and one he hates. V'yoldu lo'banim, and he'll have children. Ha'ahuva, from the one he loves, v'hasnua, and the one he hates. V'haya haben ha'bechar l'sniya, and the bechar will be born to the one who he hates. And now the question is, he has two kids. One from the snua, who he hates, and one from the ahuva, who he loves. So says the Torah, he can't give the rights of the bechar to the son of the one who he loves, because he's not the bechar. The bechar comes from the one that he hates. So the Goyen has a bunch of questions here. Wait a second. Says the bechar, says the Goyen, it says, V'yoldu lo'banim ha'ahuva v'hasnua. He had children from the one who he loves, the one who hates. Meaning, who gave birth first? The Ahuva. So why is the Torah saying that the Bechar came from the Snua? It says, V'yoldu lo'banim ha'ahuva v'hasnua. So the Torah contradicts itself. First it says, V'yoldu lo'banim ha'ahuva v'hasnua. That sounds like the Ahuva was the one who gave birth first. Then it says, V'haya haben ha'bechar la'sniya. It just said the Ahuva gave birth first. And also, why does the Torah have to say that don't give the bechar to the kid who's born from the snua? Don't give the bechar to the one born from the ahuva. Why would you think you could? We know there's a halacha of bechar. You can't arbitrarily say, oh, even though you were born first, I'm going to give the bechar to the kid of the ahuva. Why does the Torah even have to counteract such a notion? Why would anybody think you'd be allowed to transfer bechar from the ben hasnua to the ben ahuva? And third of all, why would the Torah talk about a situation where you hate your wife? You know how to hate your wife. There's a pasuk in the Chumash, like what's the situation over here? So the Goyen says, you know what the Torah is talking about? The Torah is talking about the following case. A man divorced his wife. Why? Because the Torah says, you're not allowed to divorce your wife, ad shematzaba ervas davar. So obviously she did a terrible sin. So what happened? And you divorced her, and you took another wife. The second wife is called the ahuva, because she is acting kedasu kahalacha. And what happened? What happened was that the first wife, after you divorced her, he married the second wife shortly after. 7 months later, the second wife gave birth. And then 2 months after that, the first wife gave birth. Now, which kid is older? Well, one kid was born first. That is the kid of the Ben Ahuva was born first, because he was born after 7 months living with the second wife. And then the son of the first wife was born. So the son of the Snua is born second. The only thing is he was conceived first. And the reason why the father wants to give the Bechar to the Ben Ahuva is because he was actually born first. So both of these kids were Petarechem of their mother. One of them was born first from the mother, the other one was conceived first. And the Torah is saying, no, you can't give it to the Ben Ahuva. Kihu Reishis Oinai. The second kid is your first seed. So Loi Mishpat HaBechara. Yeah. Don't eat it. Just think about it, right? A person had 2 wives. One, he had a child from the first wife, and then a second wife. The only thing is, the kid from the second wife was born before the kid from the first wife, because the kid from the second wife was born after 7 months, and the kid from the first wife was born after 9 months.
But we are not holding from conception.
So, when it comes to Bechar of 2 different wives, says the Gra, you follow conception. This is a very controversial piece, and we're not getting into it right now. These are the words of the Vilna Gaon. According to this, then, perhaps Yaakov Avinu had the right to make the case that he was the Bechar. So he's the older one, according to this system. We'll have to analyze one time whether this system is halachically valid. But that's the system, that you follow conception and not birth. That being the case, what does that have to do with Lavan and Yaakov Avinu? Yaakov is going l'shitase. Why? Because just like Yaakov and Esav were twins, Rachel and Leah were also twins. Who was older? Leah was older. But Yaakov l'shitase holds that it doesn't go by birth; it goes by conception. Mevila Yaakov held Rachel was the older one. That's why Yaakov was marrying Rachel. Because Yaakov held, Avada Yaakov knew this Shiur, that you don't marry the younger sibling before the older sibling. But Yaakov also knew the Vilna Gaon, that Rachel had the halachic status of the older sibling. Why? Because Rachel was conceived before Leah.
Actually, this Bechor is based on Petarechem.
Yeah.
But not for Yerusha.
Of course for Yerusha.
A man marries a woman, and she's had 7 children. He had his first child with her. Then he's not a Petarechem, but he's a Bechor.
But that's beside the point.
But all right, doesn't matter.
Okay, Rabbi said that's one idea of how Yaakov Avinu was allowed maybe to violate this principle of Le'yasa Ken Bim Kaimenu Lasei Satzeira Lifnei HaBechira. Why? Because Rachel, according to the Rishonim, who was older?
Rachel.
Yaakov was older. Yaakov was the Bechar. According to that, then it would come out that Rachel was older as well. Okay, bottom line, let's get to the halacha. Are you allowed to marry off a younger sibling before an older sibling? What are the halachic aspects of this? So we go to a Gemara in Bava Basra on Daf Kuf Chaf. Look at number 8. In the Torah, it talks about the Bnei Slavchad. And the Bnei Slavchad's names are mentioned 3 times. 2 times in Parshas Pinchas, in Chumash, in Parak Chav Vav, Pasuk Lamed Gimel, and Parak Chav Zayin, Pasuk Aleph. Who knows their names? What? Machla Noah. Machla V'Noya Chaga Milka V'Sirtza. Is that in that order?
In one place.
In that order?
It could only be wrong.
No, but it's different later on.
Okay, so the pasuk says like this: Eila mishpachos Menashe utzlavchad ben Chefer loyhayu loy banim kiyim banais v'shem benai slavchad machla v'noya chagla milka v'sirtza. Then Chav Zayin Vatik Ravna B'nai Slavchad ben Chever ben Gil ben Malchim ben Menashe ben Shchos ben Menashe ben Yosef Ve'ela Shmois b'Noisef Machla Noya v'Chagla u'Milka v'Sertza. Comes Parshas Masei, Perek Lamed Vav Pasuk Yod Aleph. What does it say?
Vatiyena machla.
Vatiyena machla sirtza. So it's at a different order. V'chagla u'Milka v'Noya. Says the Gemara Bava Basra, what happened over here? Says the Gemara, Lahalon manan hakasav darach gedulasan, v'kan darach chachmasan. Later on, it speaks about them in their order of age. V'kan darach chachmasan. And here it talks about them in order of wisdom. In other words, when they came before Moshe Rabbeinu to make their claim that since Safra didn't have sons, they should be Zoicha to Yerusha, they were coming in order of wisdom, because they were presenting their case in front of Moshe, so they came in order of intelligence. However, when it talks about later on, then it talks about them in the order of age. Messiah Rav Ami. This is a proof to Rav Ami. The Amar Rav Ami, B'yeshiva halach achar chachma. When you're sitting, you follow wisdom. B'mesiba, when you're at a party, halach achar zikna. At a party, you follow age. Anything to do with sitting, you follow wisdom. Anything to do with partying, you follow age. So what does this mean? When it comes to sitting, you follow wisdom. When it comes to partying, you follow age. Says the Rashbam, right? There's no Rashi over there. Says the Rashbam, Kishenisu b'noi Slavchad. When the b'noi Slavchad get married, when they got married, Manan HaKasav Derech Gedulasan, the Torah lists them in order of age. D'chsiv Vatiyena Machla Sirtza Chagla Umilka V'noya B'noi Slav Levnei Doyen Lenoshim. Now, why over there does it list it in order of age? Umistaber dekach nodu. It is logical that that's how they were born. Kedachsiv la yeyasa kein bim koimenu la sesatzira lefnei abechira. Says Rashbam, they probably got married in order of age because of the pasuk by Lavan that we don't do this in our place to give the younger one before the older one. Wow. So Rashbam is saying that when the B'nai Slavchad got married, they got married in order of age. Why? Because they probably didn't violate Das Zikeinenu Lavan. But over here, Kisha'amdu Lifnei Moshe, when they stood before Moshe, Darach Chachmasan, in the order of their wisdom, Kiseder Shehin Chachamais, Zu Yosem Mizu, Hikdimam Nakasa, Machla, Noya, Chagla, Milka V'Sirtza. Now says the Rashbam, based on what are we interpreting the pasuk this way? Based on the fact that otherwise they contradict each other. Based on that. In other words, we don't really have any conclusive proof that one pasuk is talking about marriage and one pasuk is talking about wisdom, but in order to faren for the stira and the psukim, that's how we interpret the psukim. So according to the Rashbam, it would seem to come out that when siblings get married, they should get married in order of age, following the paradigm of the B'nai Slavchad, who were listening to the hashkafa of Zikainenu Lavan. Now we don't paskin based on a Rashbam. Let's look at the Torah. The Torah says, Hayu biyachad chacham, shemuflag b'chachma, v'hu bachar. Let's say you have at an association, at a gathering, a wise man who's an exceptional in wisdom, and he's young, he's not even married. V'zaken shemuklav b'zikna, and an old man, he's exceptional in old age. V'hu chacham k'tzas. When it comes to wisdom, he's not that exceptional though.
Alzheimer's.
Avaloi kibachar b'yeshiva, but not like the young man. Avaloi kibachar, not like a young man. So you have a bunch of people sitting around the table. One is a young guy, he's a whippersnapper, but he's a kid. The other guy is an old Jew with a long white beard, but he's not as big of a chacham. So who goes first? B'yeshiva shaldin, when it comes to a court case, oy shal Torah, or when it comes to Torah ideas or teaching. If you have a dais, and this is a Torah gathering, you don't look at age, you only look at wisdom. But he's just a little bit smarter, it doesn't matter. Chachma trumps everything. Uledaber tchila. You want to know who should speak first? Somebody who's 15 years old, but he's a gadol adar in terms of knowing Torah, or someone who's 97, but he's a little bit less in chachma. We don't look at age, we look at chachma. Uve mesiba shel mishteh, but when you're at a wedding and you have a dais there, oishal nesuin, or marriage, holchen achar hazikna, you go after age, lahishivai baraish, to put him at first. These words of the Torah, this is the $1 million statement. The Torah says when it comes to din or Torah, you follow chachma. When it comes to a party or marriage. So the question is, what does the Bach mean when he says or marriage? He already said or a party. A party includes a bar mitzvah, it can include all the parties you could think of. We would know on our own if it said Mesiba that it would include Nesuin. Why does the Torah seem to single out Nesuin? Is the Bach not paskening lahalacha? Then when it comes to marrying off your kids, you must do so in the order of their birth. That's the simple reading of the Bach. That's the simple reading of the Torah. In fact, the Bach comes along, the Bayis Chadash, Rabbi Yoel Circus of Krakow, the father-in-law of the Taz, and the Bach says, "Mashikatz Rabbeinu, uve mesiba shel mishta oishal nesuin holchen achar hazikna lo shiva brosh tema amay yitzrich lefare shel nesuin tvei mishar mesiba shel mishta v'nira dehai nesuin hachi perushai." This is what it means. Im achim oyachoyos yasulem nesuin. If you're marrying off brothers or sisters, afagav she'echad gadol mechaviroi, even though one is older than their friend, b'chachma lo yakdimu lasis nesuin lekatan b'shanu imneishu gadol b'chachma. In other words, you have two kids. One boy, he's 21. He's the future gadol hadar. The 23-year-old, he's nothing to write home about. So the little kid says, "Look, I'm asid legadlus. I want to get married first." The father said, "Very nice, but you let the older sibling go first." Ela yakdimu lasis nesuin legadol b'shanim afal pi shehu katan b'chachma. Why? We find by the B'nai Srafchad this concept. Says so the Bach actually quotes the Rashbam, and he paskins based on the Rashbam. And he quotes the Rosh, who quotes the Rashbam. Im yasu nesuin holchem achar hazikna lahishivai barosh devein b'mesiva vein b'asiyas nesuin yakdim l'mushagad b'shonim b'shan rabbi shenagad b'chachma. So halacha l'maisa, the Bach seems to say that if you have kids, you marry them in age order. That's the psak of the Bach.
He basically separates boys and girls.
No.
Where'd you get that?
Because first of all, separates boys and girls. If you have an older son and a younger daughter, younger son and an older daughter, is that the same? I don't think so.
He doesn't talk about that. He says if you have if you have brothers or sisters, you want to know who comes first. Does a 19-year-old girl, does a 20-year-old boy come before a 19-year-old girl? Now this girl, at 19, girls get married. At 20, boys don't get married. Right? So now what? The girl has to wait till the guy's 22 or 23 or 24? He doesn't talk about it. L'chor or not. Okay. Rabbi said, here's the question. The question is, what is the logic of this halacha, at least the way the Bach understands it? Why would a younger sibling wait for an older sibling? What's the concept of lo yeyasa kain bim kaimenu lases hatzeira lefnei habechira? Let's add the following question. We have a piece over here from the Sefer Hadrash V'Ha'yan of Rav Aaron Levine, the Bezdin of Raisha. He was nifter on Vav Tammuz 1941 after being caught by the Nazis. You have his chidushim from when he was 15 years old, and when he was 15 years old, you have some of his chidushim in the Sefer Beis Yitzchak, who was his grandfather. The Steichemed has chidushim from him from when he was 16 years old. He was a orator par excellence. He was a nayam b'chesed elyon, and he raises the following question. We know that this concept of getting married in order of age that Rabbeinu Tam quoted in Kedushin Nun Beis, that the Rashbam quotes in Bava Basra, it comes from the pasuk of Le'yasa Kain Bim Kaimenu Lase Satzeira Lefnei Habechira. Well, asks Rav Aaron Levine in Ois Gimel, how could you learn from that pasuk? there's a concept ein lamedin mikaidem matan Torah, and this is cited in Tosfos and Ma'ikatan Daf Chaf. That's why Rabbi say, what's the makar of Avelos for 7 days? Well, there's a pasuk in Chumash that Yosef HaTzadik sat Avelos for his father, and we don't learn Avelos from there. Why? Because we don't learn from Kaidem Matan Torah. So if we don't learn from Yosef, certainly we shouldn't learn from Lavan, right? So what's this concept of not getting married before an older sibling? Where does it come from? Also, the pasuk of Le'yasa came b'm kainenu los seis hatziira lefnei habechira is only that a father should not give over his younger kid before the older kid. But by the Bnei Slavchad, there was no father. So mehechi teisi that a younger sibling on their own should not get married before the older one. If the pasuk is saying explicitly Le'yasa came b'm kainenu los seis hatziira lefnei habechira. So says Rav Aaron Levine, you know what this is based on? This is based on the following pasuk. And it's based on the following idea. And that is, we're not learning out of this pasuk that a father is not allowed to marry a younger sibling before an older sibling, because you can't learn out from Kaidem Matan Torah. All you're learning out from here is that it's a little bit of a bizayon for a younger sibling. Excuse me, it's a little bit of a bizayon for the older sibling if their younger sibling gets married first. It hurts them a little bit. It bothers them. It's a pchisus. It's a genai. Once we see in the Torah it's a genai, then we apply the following rule. Is a person obligated to honor and show respect to an older sibling? We know you have to honor your father and mother. Kabed es avicha v'yasimecha. But the Gemara in Ksubis on Kuf Gimel Darshans, Es avicha v'yasimecha l'Rabbi sachicha hagadol. So that pasuk that you have to honor an older sibling, that's after the Torah was given. So that we know already is a din d'oraisa. They have to show honor to your older sibling. I remember if I used to like to fool around. I used to like to tease my younger siblings. I used to tell them S, right? S. L'Rabbi sachicha hagadol, right? S. But we already know that's a din d'oraisa, that you have to honor an older sibling. Now, who says that it's a lack of honor for an older sibling if a younger sibling gets married first? That we learn from the pasuk. We're not learning out a halacha from the pasuk of Lo yeyasa kein b'm kaimenu. There's already established halacha after Matan Torah that you have to honor your older sibling. We're just showing from that pasuk it's considered a genai and a genus and a pchisus for a younger sibling to get married first. Once it's a pchisus, we apply the din Torah of kabed es avicha v'yasimecha. We're not learning out from Lavan. Maybe dinim changed, but human nature never changed. And if it was a pchisus before the Torah was given for a younger sibling to get married before an older sibling, then it remains that way. Now, this is the concept of the Rav Aaron Levine. What is it based on? It's based on the mitzvah of wait a second. But it only says the rabbi's achicha hagadol. What about your older sister? Do you have to honor your older sister? Well, the Shvus Yaakov in Chelek Aleph, Siman Ayin Vav, quoted in Ois Beis in number 12, Shvus Yaakov says it's only an older brother and not an older sister. So according to the Shvus Yaakov, that would not fit into this thesis that the logic of Le'yasa Kein Bim Kaimenu is based on Kabed Es Avicha V'Yasimecha, because that would not apply to sisters, so Lavan would have no right to invoke that. However, the Chida in the Birkei Yosef dismisses the Shvus Yaakov, and he is marech that there is a mitzvah of Kibud Avaim by an older sister. Interesting. And therefore says the Drash V'Ha'iyon, there is a concept of a younger sibling not getting married before an older sibling. Who do we learn it from? We don't learn it from Lavan. We learn it from Kaved Asavich V'Yasimecha. Lavan just demonstrates to us that there is an inyan of Genayim Chisus for the younger sibling to get married first, and he concludes, he quotes the Bach, where the Bach seems to paskin this way, that a younger sibling should not get married before an older sibling, and says the Drash Ve'Ayon, I have another basis for this, and that is, there's a pasuk in the Gemara Darshans in Soita. It says, "V'Chevron sheva shanim nivnasa lefnei Tzayan Mitzrayim." Chevron was built 7 years before Tzayan. So the Gemara asks, what does it mean it was built? It can mean it was actually built. Do you think a person would build a city for his younger son before he builds a city for their older son? Says the Reish Rav. So if the Gemara is saying a person would never build a city for a younger son before the older son, certainly a person would never marry off a younger sibling before an older sibling. And this, again, he says, is another basis for not marrying off a younger sibling before an older sibling. By the way, there's another factor here. Because even though there's a rule that you have to honor an older sibling, is it only when the father is alive? What about after the father passes away? So you say, why would it make a difference? It makes a big difference. Is there an inherent mitzvah to honor your older sibling? Or is it only an offshoot of showing respect to the parent? The parent would want you to show respect to an older sibling. But if the parent is not here anymore, so then maybe you don't have to show respect to an older sibling. Just like a parent's spouse. The mitzvah of respecting Eshes Avicha or Baal Imecha is only when the parent is alive. When the parent is not alive, there's no mitzvah to show honor to their spouse. So the Minchas Chinuch, in Mitzvah Lamed Gimel, the Minchas Chinuch says, V'ayin Ramban, b'Sefer HaMitzvah Sham, Daitoi, Degam Achiv Hagadol, Hu B'chaye Avos, Machmas Kibudam Kiritzayim B'kach. The Ramban is mashma, that you only have to show honor to an older sibling when the parent is alive. However, says Minchas Chinuch, from the Rambam it appears that even la'achar moisam there would be a chiyuv of kavod. Why? Because only by Eshes Aviv and Baal Imai does the Rambam make a point of saying it's only kozman that the father is kayam. And here the Rambam doesn't say anything. From that it's mashma that in all circumstances there would be a obligation to honor the older sibling, even la'achar misas avim. So, according to this concept, the Reish Rav is suggesting that the inyan that he learns from the Bach of not marrying off a younger sibling before the older sibling, we asked, well, it's only l'chayra, the pasuk is only talking about when the father is alive. But from where would we learn that even after the father is no longer alive, the younger sibling should not on their own marry before the older sibling? So the Reish Rav is saying that since it's based on the mitzvah of kibud avayim, and that, according to Minchas Chinuch, would continue even after the father passes away, it wouldn't be correct, according to this understanding, for the younger sibling to get married before the older sibling. However, as we're about to see, this is not really binding. Why? Take a look at number 14. Yeah. Take a look at number 14. The Shas HaTshuvos Marasham. Let's see, I believe I found which chelek it's in. Chelek Gimel. It's chelek Gimel. Siman Kuf Lamed Vav. The Marasham was asked, Mechtavai Higiani, V'alderach Sheilasai Be'echad Shahilei Im Ishtai Banais. A man had daughters. Umeisa Ha'isha. And his wife died. V'nasa Acheres, he married another woman. V'hod Men Abbas. And he had another daughter. Umeis Ha'av, the father now died. V'ishtai Hasheni, and the second wife, Nisis La'acher, is marrying someone else. V'hechzik Bita Etzla, and he's supporting the daughters. Uchshegadla, and when she grew up, Bas Chaf Beis Shanim, she became 22. Asa Imay Shidduch Im Talmid Chacham Asher. He married off one of the daughters who was 22 years old to a wealthy Talmid Chacham. Mamish. The best of both worlds. Right? The best of both worlds. Viata Habas Hagdolim and Makev is now the 30-year-old girl is saying, well, wait a second. Well, Lo Yeyasa came bim kaimenu, Lo Seis Hatzira Lefnei Abachira. Why are you marrying off my younger sibling to this Usher Talmid Chacham? You got to marry me off first. Mitam Lo Yeyasa came bim kaimenu, Lo Seis Lefnei Abachira. And the questioner wanted to say that, wait a second, the father is not around. and he's not the one marrying her off. So there's no Isser on the girls, and it's a Shas Adchak. And it's a Shas Adchak. Why? Because the older one is already 27 years old. And it's a Shas Adchak. And V'lein is damin lo shidduch. Umi yoidea kamatis akev. In other words, we don't know how long it could take. If this guy is now mevatel the shidduch for the younger daughter, who knows if she'll ever find an Asher Talmid Chacham again. So since it's a Shas Adchak, in other words, both girls are moving on in age, maybe he needs to do this. So says the Marsham. Marsham was the Posek Hadar at the end of the 19th century. He says, that which you say the father already died, and he's not the one marrying them off, says Rashbam, that's not a factor here. Because the source of a younger sibling not getting married before the older siblings, we learn from the Bnei Slavchad. And by the Bnei Slavchad, what? Their father already passed away. And in this situation, we are loimed lifnei matan Torah. But says the Marsham like this. In this case, she's already 22 years old. Back then, maybe today also, back then, 22, it's a Shas Adchak. Bevadai lo shayich iser zeh. This iser will not apply, but look carefully to what he's saying. He's saying it is asur. It is asur for a younger sibling to get married before an older sibling. But there's a heter, and the heter is she's already 22 years old. What, are you going to keep her in the house forever? Especially the shidduch is already made. What are you, crazy? You're going to be mevatel the shidduch because of this? Why? But it's asur. The Isser Zeh Einoi Rak Bechlal Nimos V'derech Eretz. This is not what we call a real Isser, a regular Isser. This is, now, it's something that we try to keep, it's something we try to follow, but it's based on respect and derech eretz that we show to a younger sibling, but it has its limitations. Now, true, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch. Where is it brought in Shulchan Aruch? Siman Reish Mem Daled. That when it comes to marriage, you have to marry off an older sibling before a younger sibling. Nikoma Kameno Din Gamor. It's not Mamash Adin. Look in Tosfos and Kedushin that Tosfos is more willing to follow the logic of Sheiris Yisrael Layasu Avla more than the Svara of Layasa Kem Bim Kaimenu. And says the Marsham, I already wrote, this is only by two daughters, but by a son and a daughter, actually, it goes like this. If a son is younger than a daughter, you got to marry the son off before. Why? Because the son has a chiyuv to get married. A woman doesn't have to get married. It doesn't say in Torah a woman has to get married. A woman doesn't have a mitzvah puravu. A woman may want to get married, and she definitely should get married, but the man has to get married. The man has a chiyuv of puravu. So if the girl is older and the son is younger, avada, the son could go before the girl.
Even if the girl
always.
is a chak?
Again, right now she doesn't have anything on the table.
No, I'm saying you have
again, if
boy that's 17 and
the boy always goes first. If the boy's ready to go and the boy's ready to go, the boy goes because the boy has the chiyuv. This concept of Leah, so B'chlal, the Marsham is saying it does not apply to boys and girls. The opposite of what we would have thought. We would have thought, let the younger girl go before the older boy. No, let the younger boy go before the older boy, because before the older girl. But where does the concept apply? It does apply. Where does it apply? It applies in the ideal world, which we don't live in. It applies in the ideal world when you have kids perfectly aged, 21, 19, 17, 15, and they all go one by one. So what should you do? You should follow what it says in Shulchan Aruch, to marry the older sibling before the younger sibling. Why? Derech eretz. But once things are getting, a little difficult, like it's difficult in this world, so you basically, you try to get them out of the house however you need to, right? But so far we've seen two approaches. The approach of the Adrash v'Ha'iyun is, it's asur. You're now to marry a younger sibling for an older sibling. Why? Now, does that mean if it's a Shas Adchak, then you basically have to hold the younger kid hostage forever until? Probably not. I'm sure there comes a point in time when it starts getting difficult, you let him go. But according to the Joshua Ian, it's based on real halachic considerations of honoring your older sibling. According to the Marsham, it's based on nimus v'derech haretz, and if there's a shas hadchak, you let it go. Comes Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zeretzai B'Kosh Livracha, and he completely revolutionizes the entire sugya. I just want to point out, when we talk about the topic of honoring your older sibling, I think this is a halacha which is very much neglected. Just to show you how far it goes. Look, by Kabir Savicha V'Esimecha, somebody poses a question. So, if your father's there, you're not allowed to offer your opinion. You're not allowed, not before him. Forget about before him. Right? The pasuk says, Vayan Lavanu Besuel, says Rashi, Rasha Haya. He's a Rasha. He's a Rasha. Why? Because he spoke before his father. Nobody asked you. What about a person your father says something, you say, yeah, I endorse that. You're not allowed to do that. Father doesn't need your endorsement. You don't open up your mouth. But even by an older sibling, if your older sibling is there, you're not allowed to speak first. So really? The Medrash says the reason why Rachel died before Leah is because Vatan Rachel v'Leah. Rachel spoke up before her older sibling. That's why she died first. Look in the Med, look at number 15. Lama meisa Rachel tchila, Rav Yudin Rav Yossi, Rav Yudin Amar, Shedibra b'fnei achoisa. Say, what was Rachel thinking? She obviously knew at the beginning of the Shiur, she was conceived first. She probably held she was a Bechar. But doesn't mean it, but the Torah argues on that, right? Okay. Comes Rav Moshe completely revolutionizes the sugya. Look, this is the Igros Moshe in Chelek Even Oezer, in Siman Even Oezer, in Even Oezer, Chelek Beis, Siman Aleph. The first tshuva. Ba'ach tzayer im yachal lisa isha koidem achiv hagada. Kisha achiv makbid. The brother says I'm gonna dance at your chasana. I'm gonna go to your vart. Everyone's gonna be wishing you mazel tov. I'm gonna feel terrible. I'm gonna be so embarrassed. Says Rav Moshe, Nisha'alti mihagayvid de sharmash. Be'ach tzar shenazdam la shidduch hagan. The kid got a good shidduch. V'aviyah kala roitza dafka shisena. The father kala is not interested in the older brother. He wants the younger brother. And he wants to do it now. He's not interested in a year and a half. V'lo yichak ad shizdam la'achav agad shidduch. V'yisad chila. Why? Because he wants the boy to get married before the boy's 20. Like he should, Rav Moshe says. And the older brother is in pain, as is human nature. It is painful for an older sibling when the younger sibling gets married. No question about it. Imrashoy hatzar lisa tchila. Could the younger sibling get married first? And could the father help the younger sibling get married first? Says Rav Moshe, so we would say, well, the Drashva'ian would say, no, here the younger sibling really shouldn't get married. And the Marsham would say, look, it's not a Shas Hadchak yet, he should really wait for the older sibling.
But he's also, the youngest son,
He's also a person. It's painful to wait.
Yes.
He's still a kid, he's a young kid. Says Rav Moshe, Pashut la'aniyas daiti l'chadchila yochal ach tzor lisa isha. L'chadchila he could get married. The older brother doesn't have a shidduch yet. The younger sibling says, what do you want from my life? I have to put on tefillin, and I have to send the sukkah, and I have to get married. You're telling me I shouldn't do a chiyuv in the Torah because my older brother didn't do a chiyuv? Let's say my older brother is sleeping for Shacharis. So I shouldn't get up out of respect to my older brother? Let's say my older brother is not putting on tefillin. He's going to feel bad if I do. What can I tell you? I have my own independent obligation. It's not his fault that he's not getting married because he doesn't have any good prospects right now. Says Rav Moshe, Lo shayach shelachein yizbata gam hatzar mitzvasai bilti yadua. The koshakain, certainly, says Rav Moshe, the woman, the shidduch that's being presented to the younger boy, the father doesn't want to wait. The father wants the chasana to take place by the time the kid is 20. And then the father says, if you don't want to marry my daughter now, go find a different guy for her to marry. So then, and it's a good shidduch, avada. You don't have to lose a shidduch to wait for your older sibling. But I saw some mechabrim, some writers of Svarim, they quote the Bach, who explains the Tur, that a younger sibling, he says, Besudas, Mishteh, Oy Nesuin. Says Ramosha, they completely and erroneously have no idea how to read a Bach. They don't know how to read a Bach. Yeah? Why? Says Rav Moshe, you know what the Bach is talking about? Excuse me. Says Rav Moshe, the case of the Bach is if you have two kids and they're both engaged, and now you want to know which one should you rent out a wedding hall first, which one should you do kedushin for first. So you have two kids and they're both engaged. The Bach says you should marry off the older one before the younger one. Because nobody would ever say something so far-fetched that you have to engage off a younger kid, an older kid before an older kid. An older kid before the younger kid. He says, who tos gomor? It's a mistake. They're about to do nesuin. Now the question is, who should we be mechabed? Should we mechabed the older one by doing the nesuin on the older one? Should we mechabed the younger one doing the nesuin on the younger one? Even though the younger one is smarter and wiser. Otherwise, why is the Bach bringing in the fact that the younger kid is smarter? Who cares? What does the kid's chachma got to do with who should get married first? The answer is it's a matter of kavod here. They're both on the table. They're both engaged. The shaila is which one should you do nesuin for first? You like ateres chaya. You like ateres avram. You like chveis, wherever you want to marry. And you only use that hall, and you like a certain Masada Kedushin, you only use this Masada Kedushin. So the question is, whose services are you going to use first? Halach achar chachma b'mesiba, halach achar zikna. That's what the Rashbam explains. But when they say nesuin, in kakavana l'sudas nesuin. Del ma'lanu b'shul ma'oisin mishteh, el ha'pirish v'adin l'maisa ha'nesuin. However, if the older brother doesn't have a woman to marry, even though the older brother is a Talmid Chacham, and even a bigger Talmid Chacham, you don't have to wait. That means the older brother could be a bigger Talmid Chacham, he could be smarter. A younger sibling never has to wait for an older sibling. Says Rav Moshe, the concept of kavod is only if they're both in the Parsha. He says, "V'gam hakavod l'shach el b'kedima kishchem tarbai lasos v'loy kishachem ein yochel lasos." If one of them is not able to get married now, so then there's no concept of being. I'll be mechabed you. Mechabed you for what? You don't have a key. You're not in the parsha of the kibbutz. You want to. Let's say you hold open a door, so it's a kavod. You let someone who is right behind you go in. You don't have to wait for a guy who's on the plane now. He's going to be landing in 6 hours. You don't have to open the door for him. If you do, that's foolish. He's not about to walk into the door. So if you have an older sibling, they're not about to get married, and you are, because you have somebody on the table, you don't have to wait. There's no Inyan to wait, says Rav Moshe. He says Rav Moshe, and this is Klal Gadol. Says Rav Moshe, what about the fact... One second. Okay, I'm not up to that. Look, go back to the page 3, about 10 lines up. He should not refrain. The older brother says, but I'm in such great pain. It's so hurtful. Says Rav Moshe, we tell him, you're not allowed to be hurt. We mean it's so hurtful. We say, get over it. Why are you hurt? You're jealous? It's Isser D'Oraisa. We tell the kid, get over your jealousy. You're not to be jealous. Also, star kina. Says Rav Moshe, and the father could even what?
He's slugging up the whole spur of Derech Eretz.
Yeah. It's only Derech Eretz when they're both engaged. Now, who should get married first? So it'll be mechabed, the older sibling. But if Bechlal, the older sibling, doesn't have a shidduch on the table, now Rav Moshe says like this. He says, Rav Moshe, what if the father says he's afraid the older sibling will get sick? So says Moshe, okay, so don't be the one to take the shidduch calls for the younger sibling. But if the younger sibling wants to get married first, there's no reason to stop. Doesn't matter.
Because the boys has a mitzvah, the girls don't have. So in essence, the whole idea.
Either way, even though the girl doesn't have a chiyuv, but she's still she should get married. A woman should get married.
It's mashma, if there is kinna, he has no right to say it.
What?
That was, even if the older one was mekane, he shouldn't say it.
He should get over it. Yeah. And naturally there is.
But he shouldn't say it.
Yeah. Look, it's only in human nature. It is a very painful thing. Nobody's. Ramesh is not saying it's not hurtful, but the reality is, and this is how Ramesh spells it out. And it's really a klal gadol in life. Says Ramesh, maybe the younger sibling should wait because it's a tremendous busha for his older sibling, and it's like malben pnei chaveroi barabim. Right? It is. You could imagine at this vart, you have the younger kid and he's beaming, and the older sibling, he's there, he's white as a ghost. So in lecha malben pnei chaveroi yoiser mizu. Says Rav Moshe. Why would he even be embarrassed? There are a lot of people who don't get married right away, either because they want to go to school, or they want to make a living, or they want to be mesader their inyanim until before they get married. So nobody has to say the older sibling didn't get married because X, Y, and Z. The older sibling's not ready yet. But then says Moshe a klal gadol, and this is the end of the tshuva, and this is a very important rule in life. And this is a rule that people who rabbanim always have to worry about. Somebody once came over to me. I was once speaking about tznius. Someone said, "You're a roitzeach." I said, "Really? I'm a roitzeach." Because that woman in the shul, you can imagine, how do you think she feels when you talk about this? I said, I got a little scared. I said, He said, you're embarrassed her barabim. I said, I didn't mention anyone by name. I didn't even know who's there. I'm just teaching the halacha. Is that a legitimate concern? Says Moshe, absolutely not. Busha is when you do something that directly causes embarrassment to somebody else. But if you want to take care of your business, which every human being is entitled to, everyone's allowed to get married. The fact that somebody else will be embarrassed, that's not my problem. It's not my problem, Rabbi. Look, I'll read to you the words. He says, "V'gam istaver shlo shayach leser la'adam elasos asakav v'chol tzorchei gufay." You can't stop somebody from taking care of their needs in life. B'tayno she'echad yizbayish al yedei zeh, because someone will be embarrassed. B'mashlo yitzliach kamoisai. In other words, let's say you're applying for a job, and then you say, let me think. If I get this job that's going to make X amount of money, he's going to be embarrassed that he doesn't make as much money. Well, wait a second. Nobody's telling you to put up a sign on your front door that you just landed the job and you're making this amount of money now. But the fact, what you're not entitled to take the job, he's going to be embarrassed. I feel bad. But it's not your geshept, it's not your concern. A person is allowed to do what they need to do. It says Ramosha, "V'lechein eini roya shum iser, v'av shum davar shaloi kehoigen b'zeh." It's not even remotely not proper. Sheyisa hatzar tchila. V'adarabba. Zocha b'mitzvah rabba. He's zoich in a big mitzvah. What's the mitzvah? Nesuin, pruravu, that you're chai from age 20. And says Ramosha, why should this poor kid have to walk around with the need for zechusim, like Rava said, and the Tanbei Rabbi Shmuel says that until a person's mekayim this mitzvah, they need zechusim gedolim. Why do you have to have that on your shoulders? The older sibling wants to get married, so in the zechus that he's able sort of to swallow his pride or her pride and be misameach, v'ra, v'samach, b'libay, so they'll also be zoicha. But in terms of hanhaga for a parent, look, it's natural when a person has children. The simple derech eretz is to try to do it in that way. But if something comes up in the other way, according to Rav Moshe, there's no reason not to do so. Lavan was a Ramai. Lavan was a Merama Yaakov Avinu. This is part, Aruch Chaim HaKadosh says, it was a part of the Ramos of Lavan. Bottom line is, it's maybe a svara in terms of das adam, that if we don't know who the person wanted to marry, Rabbeinu Tam says we could assume they wanted to marry the older one. However, in terms of hanhaga, according to Rav Moshe, it's only when they're both on the table at the same time. But if one goes first, there's no problem with that. Rabbi, have a good day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.